All right, you all need to come to the front row.
Yeah.
And maybe even like drag.
Yeah, our like circle conversation felt like maybe the right
Shape. Gonna force fit it into the screen.
Yeah. Okay. I might as well say hi. I'm Brandon.
I'm Brain. Right? Nice to meet you. Yeah, too.
Looks like we are live and kicking from Community Church of Boston. And we are filming as well. And I'm just going to come up here real quick and say hello to everybody and say how wonderful it is to welcome you to Community Church of Boston. Just say that my name is Dean Stevens. We call ourselves a Peace and Justice congregation since 1920. We've been here for 105 years, and we've been in Copley Square since 1946. We own this building, and as all these construction nerds know, it's an old building, and is it ever a challenge? And I want to take all these folks and give them a tour of the whole building and tell them about the challenges that we face. We are seriously committed to making this building a state-of-the-art model for similar buildings in the city of Boston, and for energy efficiency, for climate intelligence and sanity. To that purpose, we started in 2021 installation of HVAC air source heat pumps. 4 floors. We added the other 2 floors a couple years later. After that, we got a beautiful grant from the city of Boston to redo the roof that is over us around this skylight here. And we added a couple of inches of insulation to the roof. And our next project is about windows. We will be applying for another grant for next year to get another CPA grant to replace some really rotten, almost emergency time windows on the 5th floor. We have been told that we are eligible to apply. That's the first application for eligibility. And so the next step is an actual application. So it's really exciting to be involved in this process and try to do right by our building, our stakeholders, our visitors, our tenant on the 1st floor that's a new restaurant about to open. They're called All'Antico Vinaio. They're an Italian outfit that has 50 stores in Europe and 10 in the United States and growing. 6 in New York, 2 in Los Angeles, 2 in Las Vegas, and about to be 1 in Boston. Come in and check out their really delicious sandwiches. That's all I will say. Also, check out our schedule. We are a speaker series. We have a different speaker every Sunday. We've had speakers talk about construction, and including Audrey Schulman from HEAT, who gave a wonderful presentation about a year and a half ago. Some of you know Audrey. And we also have a member who's named Matt Andrews, who has put this together today, and it's really wonderful to have Matt use our space, and we are honored to have all of you here with us today. And with that, I will hand the microphone over to Matt Andrews. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Dean. I think I'll stay seated here. We're a pretty cozy crowd. Thank you, Dean, for welcoming us to this space. You've made this really easy for me. This is my first time organizing as Resilient Building Cooperative. I've done some organizing of events in the past, but this is really like coming out and doing this is such a great location and such an amazing history for this space. So I think what we'll do is I kind of pulled this together with the idea that we'd have a conversation about kind of bringing 2 worlds together that I think ought to be intersecting, and it was kind of in my mind when I started Resilient Building that they should be intersecting, that there's like a better way to run businesses in general that's more equitable and also considers other factors than just the bottom line, like the sustainability, both in terms of emissions but also material use, and the and of course the social impact as well on the community. The kind of what is the product that we're producing, and what value does that have beyond the money we've earned by producing it. So I think that that's kind of a I see a lot going on in the co-op world, where people are talking about how do we get more co-ops started, how do we get businesses to transition to this model. And then I also see on the construction side this really emphasis on building. There's a science behind building, and we ought to be using that science to build better houses that are healthier, more comfortable, certainly even more affordable to operate, possibly more affordable to build, and we can do all of this, at the same time. It's like you need a more educated workforce, you need a more committed workforce, you need a more integrated workforce where people are talking to each other about handing off tasks from one trade to the next, for example. So I guess that's kind of my nutshell introduction for this idea of remodeling residential construction industry. This is really a great industry to get started in it. Maybe I'll talk more about that later. I don't want to spend too much time on the microphone. Maybe we can each introduce ourselves and what we do. So I'm with Resilient Building. We're a home energy rating company. We do home energy ratings is part of building code now. It was originally developed by the mortgage industry, actually, so people could get better terms on their mortgages, because if you're going to be paying less on your utilities, in theory, you can afford more on your mortgage. So that's another angle to where HERS actually comes from. So it's becoming code. It's becoming part of the Mass Save incentives program for people who are looking to get a rebate on their projects, and we're growing. So I'll leave it at that for now. Maybe we can. I'll let the speakers introduce themselves. I'll pass it over here to Kevin.
Matt, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Oh, yes, here we go. That's much better. Appreciate the opportunity to join you this afternoon. So just a means of introduction. So my name is Kevin Kuros. That's Kuros. I wear two hats for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I am a regional director for the Massachusetts Office of Business Development, or MOBD. You're going to hear a lot of acronyms. We talk in acronyms in government. MOBD is the state's official economic development agency. So we report to the Secretary of Economic Development, and we're charged with a couple of things. One is managing a tax incentive program where we can offer state tax credits to businesses in recognition of capital investment and job creation. So that's our primary reason we were organized decades ago. But the reality of it is that the Secretary doesn't just want the regional directors who are out in the field being the tax incentive guys and gals. He wants us also to be a connector, so to connect people with other state resources. So I'm not yet going to talk about cooperatives, but I want to give everyone a sense, and anyone who might be seeing this on TV as well, the process that the Secretary for Economic Development goes through in order to help businesses in the Commonwealth. So every 4 years, when a new administration takes office, be it a re-election of the prior administration or a change in administration that we had a couple years ago, the Secretary of Economic Development has to put together an economic development plan for the Commonwealth. And at the time, it was Secretary Yvonne Howe was announced as the secretary, and she said, she had two options. She could basically just mail it in, or really do a thorough job. And anybody who's met her, even in passing, you would know that she would not mail it in. So she actually scheduled about 20 sessions across the Commonwealth to listen to stakeholders, job creators, academia, organized labor, chambers of commerce, on and on and on and on, to find out what people thought the Commonwealth does well as far as supporting economic development and what we need some work on. And the resounding or the common theme that came across in almost every one of the sessions was, hey, the state has a bunch of really, really good programs. You just can't find them. Or if you do find them, you're managing multiple relationships with multiple people and multiple agencies. And that burden alone can be difficult for a business owner to leverage the programs when they're just busy running their business as well. So that sparked a project that we took on in the Executive Office of Economic Development called the Business Front Door, which we think is really going to move the needle and make it a lot easier to do business with the Commonwealth. So those of you that are here and those of you that might be watching this later on video, go out to mass.gov/BFD. Okay, BFD has an acronym that stands for something else sometimes. We think it's a big freaking deal. So that was not an accident that we ended up with that acronym, but it's the Business Front Door. And it's a portal, essentially, where you'll be able to manage your interactions with the Commonwealth. So I'd be remiss at my duties if I didn't mention the Business Front Door. We started working on it in October of 24. No, October of 23. We piloted it, soft launch in November of 24, and it just went live last month, actually, for like general availability. So again, mass.gov/BFD, check it out. If the only thing we did was pull together an inventory of all the programs that had them all on one website, I think that would have been a win. But what we actually did was you register for the Business Front Door, and you are assigned a navigator. Navigator is a real person. It's not an AI bot. So if I'm the Central Mass Regional Director. So if you're a Central Mass business, you would most likely be assigned me as your navigator. And you tell us what you're trying to accomplish. Your navigator then looks at what you're trying to accomplish, and then we'll essentially drag a bunch of programs onto your dashboard that you may want to consider exploring to help you grow your business. So please check it out. It's worthwhile. So we'll set that aside. So my second role with the Commonwealth, though, is as the interim director for the Massachusetts Center for Employee Ownership, or Mass CEO. And the URL for the center is mass.gov/massceo. So again, check it out. It's important to have a little bit of history. So for years, we would receive funding from the legislature to support employee ownership across the Commonwealth. But we weren't really in a position to do a whole lot with it internally. And so every year we would get an appropriation during the budget cycle of an earmark. So we're not yet part of the actual budget, the budgetary line items, but we would get an earmark each year, and we would put out an RFP and ask, invite businesses to essentially run the center for us. And so for the 7 or 8 years that we did this, the ICA group out of Western Mass, some of you may be familiar with them, was the winning respondent. And so they essentially stood up the Mass CEO website. They would be the first point of contact to help businesses that were exploring employee ownership, that type of thing, right? And then 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, when there was a lot of ARPA money coming in from the federal government, there was an economic development bill that was passed in the legislature. And in that bill, they included some language that actually formalized Mass CEO as an official government office. We'd never been an official office. So we think that's important because it sends a message to the world that we're supportive of employee ownership. And additionally, that legislation also created a 19-member advisory board to help set future direction for the center. And so that board comes from across industry. There are folks that are more focused on the ESOP model of employee ownership, others focused on co-ops. We have, again, organized labor. We've got academia across the board. We've got a couple secretariat appointments. We've got gubernatorial appointments. And so we're really happy with how well-rounded our board is. So the board was impaneled in March of last year to set direction for the center. And then in April of last year, I was given the honor of being the first director of the center to help stand up the center. So the board set 4 priorities in year 1. The first was basically to bring everything in-house because we had essentially outsourced the management of the center. So we had to do things like silly stuff, but like branding and logo development and collateral development and all those types of things. And obviously, we owned all the materials that our partner had produced for us, but we wanted a common look and feel that integrates well with the rest of the state. Second thing was to start a roadshow to essentially raise awareness both of the center and then also a variety of employee ownership models. So we just wrapped up last month, 6 straight months. We did a symposium on employee ownership across the Commonwealth. Our office, the Mass Office of Business Development, has 6 regions, so we decided we would do one in each region, and we get really good feedback on the road shows. We would identify an ESOP and a co-op from each of the regions. We had a marketing partner who was helping us with all the collateral development. They would interview those firms and put together a really, really nice glossy one-pager telling their story about what employee ownership has meant to their business, what their journey was, that type of thing. And then at the actual symposiums, I would do a little overview of the center, but we would then let the profiled ESOP and the profiled co-op talk about their business and what the employee ownership culture meant to their business. All right. We then also had a representative from the Small Business Administration come and talk about some financing that might be helpful to businesses that are exploring a conversion to employee ownership. And then the real meat of the program was, for about an hour at each of the symposiums, we would do a facilitated roundtable discussion where I would moderate, and we would essentially just field questions from the audience to be asked of the subject matter experts. So it was really, I think, was well received. Almost every single time, I had to play time cop. We still had hands raised when we were out of time. And the real value was not listening to me talk about employee ownership, but actually talking to the subject matter experts and kind of picking their brains and sharing war stories and successes and those types of things. So that was agenda item number 2. The third mission for the center that was set by the advisory board was to actually try to identify an inventory of existing employee-owned businesses in the Commonwealth. So list of ESOPs, list of co-ops, and we cobbled together lists from a bunch of different organizations, including our predecessors who have been running the center for us. We used their list as a starting point. And we've had some interns working through and trying to identify, like, I want a name like Kevin@companyx.com, not info@companyx.com. We want a name so we can connect, because our real hope is to develop an ecosystem where we'll be able to do things like webinars. We'll have a peer support webinar for co-ops or a peer support webinar for ESOPs, where we can get businesses together to talk about what's worked well for them, what's not worked, financing opportunities, whatever the case may be, hiring challenges or retention challenges, or whatever the case may be, right? And then also some informational webinars as well. But the second goal, though, in having an accurate inventory of the existing employee-owned businesses in the state would be maybe you start to see some similar characteristics among those businesses. And if ultimately, as a state and as a center, we want to encourage more businesses to convert and adopt some model of employee ownership. And by the way, the center is model agnostic. We don't care if it's ESOP, co-op, EOT, profit sharing pension funds. We're model agnostic. We just want to see more businesses support employee ownership. But by identifying an existing inventory, then maybe you start to identify common characteristics. Oh, privately held, profitable professional services firms might be a good co-op, for a good candidate for a co-op, or you're a mid-sized manufacturer that the CEO is looking to retire and doesn't have a good succession plan in place. Oh, that might be a good candidate for an ESOP, those types of things. So we're hoping to identify some common traits that we then can kind of fish where the fish are and start marketing and raising awareness with those, other companies that have those criteria. And then the fourth and perhaps most important challenge or objective that the board identified for us was to create a new program, a stipend program, to provide direct assistance to businesses that are looking to convert to some form of employee ownership. So, a business may be notionally attracted to the benefits of employee ownership until, in the case of an ESOP, for example, that they find out the feasibility study might be a $75,000 or $100,000 spend. Then all of a sudden you have to start questioning yourself, am I notionally involved, in this concept to the degree of $75,000 to do a study or not? So what we're trying to do, and we've got some money earmarked to support this, is hopefully by first quarter of next year, we'd like to roll out a stipend program to help offset the cost of feasibility studies, both for the creation of co-ops and ESOPs, because we feel that's a barrier to entry. And if ultimately if you never do the study, if you never engage the outside consultants to help you build your cooperative agreement or anything else that you need, you're not going to get there. And if the cost of doing that is the barrier, if we can offset some of that, we think we're going to encourage more businesses to to really deeply explore employee and worker ownership. So that's where we are. We've come a long way just since March of last year when our board was first impaneled, where we went from attending the ESOP Association semi-annual meetings, the New England chapter, to actually being a promoter with a booth and all that kind of stuff. So we think we've come a long way. And interestingly, I have attended the last 3 or 4 ESOP Association New England chapter conferences. We're the only state center that actually has a presence in the expo there. So we've already kind of like raised our visibility beyond our neighboring state centers, which is exciting. I mean, for as new as we are. So I've said way too much, but at least wanted to kind of paint the picture of who I am, how the state can help, both with my employee ownership hat on and without my employee ownership hat. So hopefully you'll take advantage of state resources. So thank you.
Wow, that was good. First off, thanks to Dean, thanks to Matt for inviting us here. I'm Amy Lieb. I'm the executive director at the Studio for High Performance Design and Construction. We also have a terrible acronym. For those of us who say that name frequently, we go by Studio HPDC, or you can just call us the Studio for short. So we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on the education and training of folks in the construction trades. As Matt referenced, there's a lot that we know about how to make good buildings that are energy efficient and that have good indoor air quality for the folks that live and work inside them, and that can have a light touch on our planet and our environment. But we still need a lot of practice doing it, and we need a lot of education and a lot of training so that the folks who actually build the buildings can do it in a way that is cost effective for regular folks like me. So that is sort of the core mission of the studio. And Dean, as you were talking about the history of this building and saying you wanted to give us a tour and talking about all the events you share here, I mean, that actually is what I think are the most interesting models that the studio brings towards our education and our training. So we specifically engage folks in the trades. And so we put a lot of instructional design into our work to make it practical, so that you're not just listening to somebody talk about building science, but you're actually getting hands-on practice, whether it's with the materials, but also with the communication that needs to happen on these complicated projects and the team building work, so that the next day when you go back to your job site, you can actually make use of the things. But the interesting pieces that I think make these things stick are the studio has a really unique approach to using the buildings that we are in that have high performance features, so that the folks who are getting trained can actually see, for example, when you gestured up at the new insulation on the roof, Brendan's pointing it out to me and saying, look, you can actually see where they've added it in right there. And that's what we bring to our training. So our studio facilities are to passive house standard, which is a very high standard of construction. And you can see the difference in the windows as you were being trained on how to think about window installation and how to do effective taping. You can see the thickness of the walls. You can see the awnings that protect from solar glare in the summer. You can feel the temperature of the very well insulated floor and tell that this is different. And it makes a huge difference. And then the second trick is we like to bring people together to be part of a community and a conversation about those building practices. And I think this is part of the support that the studio brings to the industry, is that we think there are good jobs and there are good businesses that are important to our community. And my goal as the executive director of the studio is for us to want to be together, like for us to want to work together, for us to want to have these conversations together and keep coming back to the industry. Anyone who's in construction knows that we have a declining workforce, and one that is very white and very male. And that's not going to last us very long. And so our mission as part of the industry support I think is pretty well aligned with this discussion about cooperative businesses, which are what are the things that we can do to make our construction businesses great places to work, and great places to be able to support individuals and families as part of our community. So I will give that to you.
Hi everybody, I'm Brendan. Yeah, thank you, Amy. And everybody. I'm Brendan. I'm with Byggmeister Design Build. We're a design build remodeling specific company in the greater Boston area. We currently are based in Newton, as it says here, but we're moving like next week into Waltham, so not very far. We work kind of from 93 down in like the JP Rosendale area all the way up to I suppose Medford, and then everything kind of west of there in that area. I will say so far our crew doesn't come downtown for much work. They complain about parking. So, alas. We've pitched a couple jobs and haven't gotten buy-in from the crew, so I'm not going to force it. But yeah, so the greater Boston area is where we do most of our work. We're a team of about 15 people at the moment, and that's about half production crew, as we call them, which is carpentry of various types, and then half other stuff. 4 designers, 2 registered architects, 2 designers, 2 project managers. I'm one of them, and my counterpart Rachel is the other production manager, also our CEO. She would actually probably be the better person here to speak to the worker owner cooperative structure of our company, but I will do my best as a cooperative member and not the leader of that. And we've got an estimator and a business manager. So yeah, that's what we do. Our main work is pairing renovation projects and remodeling projects with energy retrofit work. There's a bit of a challenge with energy retrofit work that it benefits substantially from good planning and design and thoughtful approaches, but folks often don't want to spend for that prep time, those professionals to spend those hours really coming up with a good plan for the work. So it's often done ad hoc, which can sometimes be done well and sometimes and often be done pretty poorly. So pairing energy retrofit work with remodeling work is nice because we take advantage of the fact that we have a designer on the job and we have professionals who are able to spend a lot more time knowing the house, knowing the project, and planning for, let's say, a kitchen remodel at the same time as we're going to insulate your roof line and maybe convert you over to heat pumps or something like that, or an addition or a deck or da-da-da. Any of the things that people do to their houses, windows, siding, roofing, etc. So that's kind of our little niche in the market, and works very well here in the Boston area. Me personally, I grew up just outside Boston in Concord, Mass, and I went to UMass Amherst, studied building construction tech there. And I started out in the industry as a HERS rater for sustainable energy analytics, and then for construction conservation services group and Clear Result, and did that for a long time. Third-party verification, lots of blower door testing and checking insulation jobs and all that good stuff. And that's kind of where I cut my teeth, and I learned a whole lot in a very short amount of time, seeing very many jobs as a third-party verifier. Then I kind of wanted to stop being just that one small part of a job and have more ownership and more control and more power over projects, so that you could, learn how they come together. There was a lot of magic that happened that I was never able to be involved in. So design build is like, now you get it all. Now you get everything, and you're also responsible for everything, which is, it's a double-edged sword, right? But yeah, I've been at Byggmeister going on 6 years, like in a couple weeks. And 3 or 4 of those have been, I guess 3 have been part of this worker owner cooperative. We have a 3-year employee status before you get offered to join the worker owner cooperative. So yeah, so that's me and that's what we do. And yeah.
Was the company organized as a co-op, or
No.
it start and then it converted to a co-op?
Yeah, so Byggmeister has been around for about 40 years, a little over 40 years now. And the owner and founder, his name is Paul Eldrenkamp. A lot of people know him. Yeah, a long time ago, had set the plan to transition to worker owner cooperative structure and put in place Rachel as the CEO long before he left. And then I was kind of like the final, take the rest of the work off Paul's plate and send him on his way. And then we, as the employees, bought the business from him, and then the cooperative kind of began. I think we're up to about 11 out of the 15 of us who are cooperative members, and that's everybody who's eligible. The people who are not are just not yet at 3 years and not able to buy it. We hope that they all will want to be a member. It's not mandatory, but so far it's, a very high success rate. Exactly. Yeah. There's the
for the.
Yeah.
You have to be 3 years, at least 3 years in the corporation working for them, and
Yeah.
then you can be part of them.
Yeah, exactly. There are a whole lot of bylaws that I keep learning more and more about as the years go on that people have spent a lot of time and energy putting together. I would assume that is called a bylaw. I'm almost sure of it. And yeah, it's after 3 years. There is a bit of a discussion between the cooperative members about like, are we sure we want to offer this person, membership in the cooperative? If they've made it 3 years and they still work here, then so far we haven't said no to anybody. The only person who said no to joining was somebody who was about to retire anyways within the next couple of years, and they just said, I'm just going to kind of ride my next couple of years out, and they've since left. So now it's only people who have not hit that 3-year mark. Yeah. But yeah, I had to look it up because you kept mentioning ESOP and co-op, and I was like, we are co-op, not an ESOP. Yeah, I can speak to a lot of being, a member for the past couple of years, but not a ton about the structure. I haven't sat on any of the boards yet, although I'm consistently being encouraged to run for one of them. And I will know more at some point soon. Yeah, so cool. Suppose we open it up.
Well, thank you, everybody. That's a really amazing. I didn't know what I hadn't heard any of you speak previously, so very impressive. And I think I want to like ask some questions, and maybe we can continue the conversation. But maybe we can. I believe these microphones work, so maybe it'd be easier to have a little more back and forth if we actually pass these microphones up to people. What do you think about that?
Sure.
You could share a microphone. Okay. You can take them out of the stand. You can hold it. Thank you, Dean. And this one works too, right? Pull it over. Kevin, maybe you could fill us in a little bit for people who maybe don't know all the acronyms, what an ESOP is, and what these. You say your Mass CEO is structure agnostic. What are you alluding to here?
So there are a wide variety of different employee and worker ownership models that are out there. The three primary and most popular models are, first is ESOP, that stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan, right? And that is actually a federally regulated retirement vehicle. It's essentially it's a very unique pension fund, for lack of a better term. Okay, and the way that the ESOP works is a trust is established that buys the business from the prior owners. Okay, at the end of each year, the board of the company decides what percentage of profits are going to be distributed to the employees, what will be held in reserve for future investment or just the capital reserve fund, etc. And then, and again, this is all at the 10,000-foot level, and there are books available that are, ESOP 101 kind of books and Co-op 101 kind of, papers that are available. And I would encourage anyone that wants to drill down to reach out to me. I can steer you in that direction. But so at the end of each year, once the board has decided how much profit to distribute, essentially the members of the company are given shares that are proportional to their percentage of the overall payroll in the business. So if there's $1 million payroll and you make $100,000 and X amount of shares are going to be distributed, you would get 1/10 of X. And those are shares in the business that are like any other share, except for you cannot sell them. So they're not like something you can sell on the stock market or anywhere else. You hold those shares until you either leave the business, retire, or pass away, at which point the trust then buys those shares back, and then you are compensated for the value of those shares. So ESOPs are essentially a retirement planning tool, but oftentimes when we speak anecdotally, with ESOP proponents, they're like, well, it's really difficult to get our younger employees excited about what is a retirement plan when, holy cow, I'm 40 years away from retiring, I don't care, right? But the reality of it is, if it's presented as wealth building as opposed to retirement planning, it takes on a whole different perspective. Because almost everyone cares about wealth building in some way, shape, or form to be able to provide for yourself and your family and et cetera. And again, while you can only cash out the values of those shares upon retirement, moving on from the business, or your estate can capitalize on them when you pass away. It doesn't mean it's forever. You can be with the company for 5 or 6 years, acquire shares, and when you do move on, you get paid out for the shares that you have required. So it's deferred compensation more so than just pure retirement. The co-op model, which you all are probably much more familiar with, is members are invited after meeting certain criteria, and not all co-ops are 3 years, some are less than that, some are more, I believe.
Yep.
But to actually buy into ownership of the cooperative. So it's so while ESOP, that contribution of those shares is made 100% solely by the business, co-ops are essentially self-funding in that the members buy into the cooperative. And then every year, similar conversation it happens. What percentage of our, after-tax profits do we want to distribute to the members, that type of thing, right? And then that is made. That is real cash on a yearly basis. It becomes taxable income for the recipients, okay? Whenever you are going to retire, pass away, or leave the business, the cooperative will then pay you back in most cases for your membership fee that you paid to join the cooperative. Okay, so if you look at the characteristics, ESOPs tend to be, and again, this is the painting with a very, very broad brush, but they tend to be larger, more hierarchically structured businesses, where co-ops tend to be smaller, more democratically governed organizations. But there are, examples in both ways. Like one of our profile businesses that we had speak at one of our symposiums was organized as an ESOP, but it was essentially, it was two brothers who ran a creative clothing enterprise. And they essentially run it almost like a co-op with very democratic management, although their financial structure is one of an ESOP. Right. So there are a bunch of different varieties of this. And the third model that is, and by the way, ESOPs have some tremendous tax advantages. They don't pay federal taxes. Okay. So it's a very significant advantage and incentive for doing so. And that's, like, why would I want to sell my business to my employees? Well, hey, I'm second generation running this company, and my kids either don't want to take over or ill-equipped to take over the business. I could just sell to an equity company and cash out and move on. But then there's no protection for my legacy. There's no protection for the employees that help me grow this business. Okay, I can sell to a competitor. Some of the same concerns. Well, are they going to keep the company all together? Are they going to, spin off this into a different division? Are they going to jettison people, whatever? Or you can sell it to your employees. So that's the kind of biggest driver. You rarely, if ever, see a company initially organized as an ESOP. They tend to be traditional companies that convert. We do hear a fair number of cooperatives that are organized as cooperatives right out of the block. In fact, one of our advisory board members is part of a cooperative, and I believe they're either 3 or 4 member cooperative only, and right out of the blocks they organize as a cooperative. So there are some differences in the models. But the third model that's very popular in other states, and to my knowledge is only one business in the Commonwealth organized this way, is what's called an EOT. That is an employee ownership trust. And it kind of straddles the space in between co-ops and ESOPs. ESOPs can be very heavy burden to manage. Every year you have to get a business assessment, you have to have business valuated. So you bring outside consultant in every single year to tell you what your company's worth, because those shares that you're awarding, you have to have a price on it. In order to have a price on it, you have to know what your business is worth. So it's very, complex process. Co-ops tend to be a lot more casually, run and organized. EOTs kind of straddle. There's some of the tax benefits of ESOPs, but not all. But they also are a lot less of a administrative burden, okay, for businesses to run. So the trust in an EOT still owns all the shares of the business. The shares just never physically leave the trust. So they might say, Kevin, you get 10 shares for this year, okay? But from an accounting and ERISA, retirement, federal regulation perspective, it's way simpler than the ESOP model because we're not keeping track of everyone's individual retirement contributions. You're spending time keeping a spreadsheet that says how many shares everybody has. So it's significantly less complicated, but there are less advantages as well. So we're not actually going to be doing a deep dive into the EOT model because like in Texas, there are dozens of EOTs and other states like Michigan, I believe has a bunch as well. We've got one, so it could be an awareness issue. It could be just a cultural, issue. We don't know why. But so those are kind of the three, major models. And again, being agnostic to which one you pick, we just want to see more workers and employees kind of benefiting from their efforts and moving the business forward. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and so maybe I'll if anybody else has questions for each other too, please chime in. I think this can be a conversation. Amy, I wanted to ask you a little more about the studio. I feel like I'm in a privileged position. I can ask the questions I want to ask. So as a HERS rater, I'm like I run my own company, but I'm also kind of just like a one-person operation. I can kind of see both perspectives, like a worker or as a business owner. Who are the people that you would say who would you say your constituency is that comes to the studio, and how do you engage them? Like, do businesses come to the studio to train their employees, or do you mostly see like individuals who happen to be just like highly motivated to like learn how to do their jobs better? What would you say? Who comes through the door at the studio?
So for actual training and education, we work at two different levels of the career ladder for construction. And our sort of core base, our starting point is carpenters. So across the trades, the carpentry career path is the only one that actually doesn't have licensure associated with it. And even though it's included in much of the vocational training that takes place at the high school level, it is the end of the building role spectrum that I think really at this point in the 21st century actually has a very high degree of responsibility for the ultimate quality and performance of a construction project, but with less formal training and less formal sort of entry points for how you learn the new knowledge and the new skills that you need to have. And so that's where the studio focuses, is first on carpenters and at the level of builders. So we do that, as I said, at 2 points. One is for mid-career builders. And so our flagship course is called High Performance Building for Carpenters. So these are folks who are already doing projects, whether they're primarily residential, but they can be new construction or remodel. And so our primary course is for them. And so often, a small to medium-sized business like Byggmeister will send one of its carpenters to do our training. Occasionally, people send an entire team to be trained together. But it's usually folks that are already employed by a building company. And Massachusetts has really great workforce training grants for Massachusetts-based companies that allow that tuition to be reimbursed by the state. So,
which you can apply for through the BFT, the Business Fund Door. You can apply for the Workforce Training Fund program.
Excellent. Thanks to the Commonwealth Corp and specifically for the Workforce Training Fund program. The second level that the studio works at, and this is a new program just in the last year, is we're actually working with vocational schools. So at the high school level, in our public vocational schools to help bring their career awareness and their building content much faster towards high performance building construction. And so we are not in the business of doing high school education curriculum, but what we do is work with the construction educators, many of whom are folks that have had a career in the trades and are doing that work in parallel to being in the high school classrooms. And we first think about how to train them as tradespeople. And then second, we bring those educators and those students out into the industry. And so we've created a great program that brings, has a curated program for bringing them to an industry conference, the Building Energy Boston conference run by our friends at the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. And we bring them to a live construction site. Last year it was to the Westcott, thanks to Cranston Construction and the wind companies for hosting. And so the students can actually see, again, just like the studio's own buildings, an active construction site where they are actually installing the intersection of the battery and the solar panels to the fire alert system, so that the fire alerts can still go off even if the power doesn't go on. Or they can see actually what it looks like to do foam insulation on the roof of your parking garage so that the building above it actually has that those layers of the building envelope to protect the building inside. So we work for both currently with mid-career carpenters and also increasingly at the vocational school level. So that's for our explicit training programs. But the other aspect, the community aspect, we have a community partner known as BS and Beer, which stands for Building Science and Beer, which is a volunteer coordinated monthly conversation and meetup of folks that are in the business and are interested in talking about building science and how to bring it to work and have a true passion for really figuring out the really intricate, difficult problem solving that goes into renovating and constructing anything with this level of complexity, where you are measuring energy efficiency and air quality and indoor comfort in terms of temperature and humidity and all the other things that Brendan knows far better than I do. And that is a whole bunch of folks. We have architects and designers, we have carpenters, we have do-it-yourselfers, like super passionate, interested homeowners. We have, engineers and folks who love to nerd out. We have folks that, are from companies like Building Science Corp, who collect data about the performance of buildings. So we had a really fascinating discussion that had Coda Ueno talking about when you blow in fiber insulation over time, it gravity packs it down. And so they've collected the data about how fast and with what angle of the roof. And so we have folks that can go super deep on the nerdy data science pieces of it. But the studio's role in that, I think, is always to try to make those conversations as inclusive as possible so that folks like me who don't know all the building science details can still be in a space where we feel comfortable saying, like happened last week in our discussion about the HVAC mechanicals for our building, like, what is the difference between, you're going to have to help me, what is the difference between latent temperature and sensible temperature? I still don't know, but that was a very important feature in the conversation. So I think that's, again, one of the things that the studio really wants, like these building practices and these topics, everybody needs to be part of this conversation. And so our goal is, how do we always ensure that people feel like they can be in the conversation? So we'll take you whoever you are, as long as you're nice, curious, and have a good sense of humor.
Those are good
Fair?
criteria. Yeah, yeah. I will just add one thing on your behalf also, that you have some pretty cool spaces that you guys use. The place in Auburndale, and then I guess Newton Falls. Is that where the barn is?
Yeah, I think it's Newton Falls.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about the
Falls.
spaces, because those are pretty special. But yeah, they're cool.
Yeah.
We're big supporters of the studio
and
people. Yeah.
We're big fans of Byggmeister too. I feel like Brendan didn't give enough credit to his own company, but it's true, as I sort of said gently in my intro. we think it makes a big difference for builders to actually talk about their trade in a space that reflects their work. And so what we try to do both in our classroom space, which is the original quote studio building, is to try to peel back the layers so that rather than just looking at a finished, beautifully completed building, whether it's through photos or whether it's through actual, leaving the assembly open and slightly unfinished, or putting a piece of plexiglass, or making the floor uh, possible just to pull up the subfloor and look through to the drainage path. We want builders to be able to see all of the decision making that goes in, as Brendan was saying, before the tradecraft gets applied. And then we love using ourselves as a test case. So we are going to monitor our own building and figure out, like, we have the best brains and the best builders, like literally helping do our space. How good did we do it? Like, we are happy to share the rate at which our own timber HP blown in insulation starts to compress over time. Because again, that's really important knowledge for folks that are in the trades, to understand that one, there is no perfection. Two, almost every problem is different and unique, and you need to be able to rely on each other to ask the questions of to actually help you figure it out.
Do you get other builders, raters, people wanting to use the space for their own
yes.
events, things like this?
I feel like you must have been set up for that question. So that's part of our community piece as well. You were set up for this question. We were talking about that before. So I often say I personally don't want to have to I don't want to have to train the entire industry. And so we allow other training groups or other like-minded nonprofit organizations to use our space essentially for free. And so we have multiple organizations that actually do their training in our space. So the folks at HERS who do HERS Rater trainings, they do it. They've done it in our classroom space, which is a passive house certified building, and hilariously makes the blower door test really difficult because it's really tight. But we do, again, recognizing that, like, we shouldn't all have to have our own training facilities. We shouldn't all have these buildings that are not put to use all the time. Like, if you are wanting to host a discussion or want to do a training and it's around green construction or sustainable construction or passive house or high performance building under that whole umbrella, you should come talk to the studio, because we're happy to share our space.
I just mean one thing. You mentioned your community commitment. One of the really eye-opening aspects as I've gotten more involved in the employee ownership.
Can I just interrupt? This is not working. And that one
Is it not?
Okay.
I'm just going to take this out of service.
That works actually. Okay. No, that's fine. So I was just saying that one of the really refreshing things that I've learned as I've gotten more immersed in the employee and worker-owned community is this whole sense of community, among worker and employee-owned businesses. I've yet to meet someone who works in an employee or worker-owned business that isn't like totally jazzed about the culture, about like the way they do things, and then almost to a company, they're very heavily involved in their communities. They take the afternoon off on Fridays to do the community park cleanup kind of thing, or those types of things as well. But I make the joke because it's so true. Is most folks that I've met in this space, they're part worker, but they're part evangelist. Like, they love talking about what a worker-owned culture has meant to their business, both from personal growth, community support, family growth, business growth, all those types of things. And the other really interesting notion is that almost any employee or worker-owned business is more than happy to sit down with the business that is kicking the tires and exploring it, to say, okay, here's what to look out for, but here are the benefits. And it's just been a really open and supporting community. And just so the community aspect is just huge. And you wonder if, like, is it a chicken or an egg scenario? Is because the company is wired this way, they're more likely to adopt employee ownership, or does employee ownership also instill a sense of community in the business? It's probably a little bit of both, but it's just a pretty fascinating phenomena that I've noticed. So.
And that's where I want to just tip my hat to Bigmeister. I feel like as a company, and you as an individual, Brendan, you help lead on so many fronts by just sharing. I mean, you're here today with me. You don't have to be. But like you share your knowledge, you share the fact that you all are a co-op and what that's like for you. You've shared parts of your own renovation of your office space. So congrats on moving in next week. And so that is the type of community that I think really helps strengthen the industry, particularly our corner of it that is high performance that we're trying to, that will eventually take over the whole. But it's those are the less talked about pieces of resilience, I think, that again help strengthen the industry. And I don't think you're wrong about the intersection between who cares about what the employee experience is like and what will make for strong retention and what will make for strong businesses and who chooses to do some kind of employee-based ownership model. I don't think that's an accident.
Yeah. I guess I would kind of say just on the chicken or the egg question with Bigmeister in particular, I mean, there's a lot about how Bigmeister was set up that, of course, is the reason why we're now working on a cooperative that has built that kind of atmosphere within our company beforehand. But I guess one specific piece that I've noticed that is different since becoming a worker owner cooperative is it's very common in the construction world, especially in the trades, for there to just be like spoken of criticism over the people above you. It's just like, oh, this company should be doing this or my boss should be doing that. That's just like the way the construction world, people talk on job sites. Like that's kind of how it is. And it's interesting that at Bigmeister, now that we're a worker on a cooperative, it's like if you have an idea, bring it. Like now the door is totally open to you to put together a pitch or to lead that or to start a group, like kind of a board or something like that brings that aspect to our business, which is both like it's kind of it's interesting how that plays out in the kind of like just the feeling amongst people, because it's both empowering and it's also like if you want it, you got to put the work in. Like you're not just going to put this on the other people's plate. You have to now step up and do the thing, which often kills the idea, right there, but not all the time. If somebody really believes in it and we'll give you as much space as we can while still trying to maintain a profitable business to be the champion of that thing. And that is different than it was before. It used to be more like, you bring it to the boss dog and they tell you whether it's okay or not. And it's not quite that way now, which I think is a fascinating change that we've noticed since becoming that business. Yeah.
Along those lines, we're actually going to be doing probably 4 or 5 months out as part of a webinar series that we'll be announcing a session called "Ideas Are Free."
Yeah,
and it's how to solicit ideas from your worker owner employees, because maybe 90% of them don't get acted on.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so how do you encourage people to continue to come back with ideas when the last 9 that they suggested no one did anything with for a variety of reasons, right? So we're going to do a session on that. And then the other piece that I wanted to share was more anecdotal, and that is there's a cultural change that happens when businesses convert, and most worker and employee-owned businesses, if not all, have some form of open books where you open up your books, everyone sees everything essentially, right? The way the company is running, what the profitability numbers are, what you're spending money on, all that, right? And in speaking with the CEO of an ESOP, he said, we opened up our books and it was almost meaningless to anybody who didn't already have some degree of financial literacy education. Mm-hmm. And so they now educate everybody in their business, from the entry-level laborer to their C-suite that manages the business, on basic corporate financial literacy. Yeah. Right. And the CEO said to me at one point that they realized they had kind of arrived when, on a lunch break, he heard 2 machinists talking about the EBITDA for the business. Right. And what the profitability numbers were, and then they have a process where the share price is announced every year. They have a guess the share price contest. Whoever is closest, that's cool. Wins dinner for 2 or something like that, right? Yeah. So they've kind of built it into the culture, because just opening up your books to people who don't understand how to read the books is that really helpful or not?
Right.
And so to their credit, they latched on to that and like, you know what, here's what will really make this more cultural and engaging for everybody. So yeah.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, we do company meetings half a day, 3 times a year at a minimum, maybe 4 times a year. And at each of those, it's like, here's what we were projecting for the year. Here's how we're tracking against that. Here's how we did last year. It's a lot of like financial stuff to go through. And at my previous job, there would be, a Zoom call where they'd talk about all this EBITDA and you'd have to like learn all that. And it's a lot to get up to speed on. I mean, I was college educated and everything. And even that was just like new for me at each of those points, like relearning that. And yeah, our apprentice carpenters all the way up to, the CEO of the company, like thankfully we're a small enough company that it's a 15-person meeting. Like if somebody's like, hey, I'm just lost on the EBITDA thing, we'll just say like, hey, let's take a minute and talk about that and make sure. And I'm sure there's plenty of other people who are like, yeah, I didn't actually quite know that all that well. So yeah, it's financial literacy is crucial to understanding how business operates. It's really difficult to look at any sort of numbers and glean like what is happening in the business. There's also like a bit of translation that just needs to happen at that level, where it's like the management team and the people who are mostly tied into the financials have to say like, this pretty much means like we're moving into a new office. That's a big investment and that's a big weight on our financial structure, and that's part of why we didn't do so well, or like we lost a couple jobs and they hurt or something like that. So as much as it's like you show all this and then most people are like, well, that's the only thing I really wanted to know is that last thing that you said right there, which is good. I mean, I think there's one stat in our industry, in particular construction, that's like 2/3 businesses go under within 5 years or something like that. And you mentioned the lack of a structure, in particular around like residential carpentry at a small to mid-scale level. I mean, there's like the unions that work on large scale projects and things like that. And I think there's just so much about the way that particularly the industry, the work that we do at Byggmeister and so many other people is just this kind of like free form situation. Yeah, you have to have, a CSL, you have your construction supervisor's license or your home improvement contractor's license. But that's just like one person who's submitting the permits and stuff like that. A lot of people working on this job who are doing a lot of things that like may or may not be qualified to do what they're doing. Yeah, you need to have a registered electrician, a registered plumber, but like the carpenters end up being the catch-all for everything else. And they could have just showed up with tools to the job site that day. They may have a lot of experience. They may not. There's no path for them, which is why it's so crucial what like Studio HPCD are doing and supporting different business structures, because there's such a low barrier to entry in particular remodeling and carpentry and working on houses. People just will start businesses willy-nilly and then they'll go under because they didn't know what they were doing from the start. Maybe they're a really good carpenter, a bad business owner, or a good business owner and a bad carpenter. I mean, you need like this combination of things that is difficult to balance. And like more stability, the more support and the better our business gets, the way the standards get raised, maybe it'll increase price across the board. But like, everybody's got a friend who's got burned on a job. I mean, my dad was the king of hiring fly-by-night carpenters who would disappear in the middle of a project. And that's just like given everybody knows that, like it's clearly a systemic issue that we're all in various ways working to try to mitigate at the very least, maybe not fix, but I don't know, hopefully fix someday. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that's kind of been in the back of my head is I actually got, when I was first getting into the industry, I was actually living in Vermont, and I went to a school called Yestermorrow,
Yeah.
and they had a design build certificate. And like design build, like those two, that word combo was like the buzz. And I know design and construction's in the name for the studio, and it sounds like it's part of the tag name for Byggmeister as well. So I'm wondering like if you could speak a little bit on that, but because I kind of I first learned that term there at Yestermorrow, and it was kind of presented to me as this idea that like in traditional construction, there's the architect on one side who draws up the plans, and then there's the builder on the other side who figures out how to actually do it. And when something goes wrong, they blame each other. And when I actually started working for a company that was trying to build high performance homes, they were still kind of in that model where it weren't conflicts with the architects so much, but it was like every trade was subcontracted out. So, well, I mean, they kind of had like a carpentry team and like general laborers, but they would have different subcontractors coming in doing different stages, and there's always this issue of passing off the work from one to the next. And now, as a HERS rater, I see that too, because sometimes, if the HVAC comes in before the insulation, maybe they can't spray the insulation around the ductwork, or the other way around. The insulation is put in, and then the plumber comes and drills a bunch of holes in it. So it's like, okay, who's it? So you really need like a project manager to like kind of grab them by the ear and say, hey, this is your responsibility too, or we need a catch-all guy to come and do the cleanup in that pass-off. But I think that the reason the businesses are built that way is because it's a huge carrying capacity to have specialists in all these different trades, to have somebody who's really an expert in doing the electrical work constantly, having work for him. Like, you have to be a really big company. And one thing that makes it kind of an exciting industry for me is somebody who's trying to find a career, but also starting a business, is that it's not like, some industries you look at, like, and there's just like, there's one retailer, there's one business that's kind of taken over the market, or there are 2 or 3 businesses that have taken over the market, and they're like, all right, I can't compete with Amazon, I can't compete with McDonald's, like, I don't know. But for some reason, the building trades, it's like, but I think maybe because it's so location specific and it's high skill, it's that there are a lot of small businesses that, it's not like one business figures out a formula and wipes out everybody else. That there could be, I don't know, but I don't know if is the answer that we try and build a cooperative where we get all those trades under one roof, or maybe we're building a network of cooperatives where you have and I'd be interested, to what degree Byggmeister does that. Do you have relationships with other businesses where, like, we just, we know who we call in. We don't, we never bid out the jobs. We, either we do it in-house or we know who we're calling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you look at some of the bigger builders in the industry, like, they don't have their own electrical division typically, like a Toll Brothers or a Pulte or something. At least as far as I know, I used to be the HERS rater, so at least that's what I remember from working with them. Like, almost no business in the construction world is like, we have everything in-house and that's what we do, for whatever reason. I think that there's a lot of different explanations at different levels of scale of project and business, what you're doing. Yeah, I mean, for us, we have carpentry in-house, and then everything else is subcontracting trade partners, some of whom we've had for a long time, some are brand new. In remodeling especially, you do certain things at certain times and not at others, and you don't have enough to keep people busy year round. Probably our electrician is the one who we work with the most frequently, to the point where we have talked about, like, does this make sense for us? Because there's also an issue with, I think they call it like a captive subcontractor. There's like a relationship where if certain percentage of their business is you, it's like they pretty much work for you. They are a separate business, but they're not. And I think for a bit we were like bordering on that line with only that subcontracting partner. So we like talked about it and thought about it, and they didn't make sense for a variety of reasons, and he diversified his business a bit, and now it's like, okay, now we're square on that. But yeah, for the most part, it's still working with a lot of other partners. I guess design build, kind of the way that I think about. Well, the way I think about it in a few ways is like the best folks, the other most common model in our industry is design bid build, where you have an architect, they do the designs, you bid it to multiple general contractors typically, somebody wins the bid and they work together. The most successful projects are often delivered in that model when they're essentially like they already know each other and they've worked together on a variety of jobs, which is to say that they're benefiting from a lot of the same things that a design build company benefits from, like familiarity with means and methods and how they schedule a job and how they work with their clients and their manner, which can sometimes for clients be a huge issue. So like that, there's clearly a benefit to that, synergy between the design and the build partners, but there is an issue of like responsibility, and that's where having it under one roof and one business is like I would be lying if I said that our construction team and our design team didn't point fingers anyway. That happens, but it doesn't it's not an issue the client ever has to deal with, which is a huge advantage for them. It's a single point of accountability for the project. Working on existing buildings, there's also like an issue of like, what did we touch and what didn't we touch and what was a pre-existing issue? So that's like another problem. But especially on like a new construction job, a design build company, it's like everything that happens here, like we are the people responsible for it. There are no questions, because those questions can become very expensive, contentious issues depending on what's going on. Like, yeah, if you want to get scared out of the construction industry, just like learn about all the litigation that's involved. It's very scary. So keeping your ducks in a row and being very professional, having a process and all that stuff is crucially important. But that was the first thing I'd say. There's a million things to say about design build versus other models. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to it. But.
I'll add one thing because I think it's an important shift that the industry is making that I've learned from all of you, and that I think we try to elevate in our training, which is any building project that is under this, umbrella of high performance building, and increasingly our local building codes are moving to more and more sophisticated standards and need for proof of performance in order to meet code. The complexity of the project is putting much more upfront need for high quality design, particularly if there's energy modeling involved. And so that dialogue between the design phase of the project and then those other folks who have to carry it out, you need to start that conversation early with the entire team of specialized trades so that the electrician understands what is being asked of their particular specialty at what points in the project, rather than just sort of what I understand to be sort of the 50-year-old model, which was like at some point the electrician would arrive when he's able to fit it in and he would do his thing and he would go away and the rest of the project just moves. At this point, the story you were telling earlier, Matt, is relevant. If the electrician arrives at the wrong point and he punches a hole to put the wires in, you've just undone and damaged some important building envelope work or control layer work that then the carpenter in the center has to figure out how to make it better, because the electrician doesn't have the skills to be able to fix the building envelope. He may have been the one that put the holes in the wrong place, or in the roof or wherever, but it's usually the carpenter, the builders who are on the site all the time that actually need to figure out how do we carry all of that through from beginning to end. And so the key difference is, I think it feels like there's a lot more integration between the design phase and the build phase, and a lot more integration and coordination across all the specialized trades from that beginning point. If you're doing a integrated project.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
I mean, I guess the really challenging balance, especially part of the reason I kind of spoke to this earlier, why I like working for design build versus being a third party verifier or HERS trader, because like you're caught in the middle of like some pretty tense conversations is maybe the easiest way to say it. But like, tradespeople have an incredible amount of experience and knowledge to do what they're there to do. But as the industry is changing, sometimes they're just lost with how to apply that in a specific situation. So you want to respect them and say, this is your fiefdom. The electrical is yours on this job. You do it how you see fit. But we have these goals that we need to meet, or these standards that we're trying to meet, or these details. So like, let me know how you want to do it, and we can talk through where that may be not quite at the point. And all those conversations are they just take more time than
yes.
the older model, where it's like they're just going to do however they want to do. They're going to leave a bunch of holes in my building. That's fine. That's whatever. Like, it's not a big deal. It'll just be leakier and they'll pay more in their bills and it's fine. It's like, it's not fun anymore. And that's the hard part. You don't want to say like use canned spray foam or use a membrane or use a caulk with a backer rod or something. Like, whatever they're comfortable with. They might have one that they're good at. And you're like, then do that, and let's do that well, as opposed to like what's hard when you're the architect trying to design something for anyone to build is you're like, I don't know what whoever is going to build this preference is in terms of means and methods. So in a design build model, we have a feedback loop where our construction team is always telling our design team, like, no, for that, like we tried that, it was awful. We're never doing that again. And you're like, okay, great. That's out of our like our design options. We won't use that anymore. And then also they'll say like this worked out really well, or let's try to find something different. So that feedback loop helps better execution going forward. It's not perfect, and that does also happen in design bid build models. Like there's successful operations in both and unsuccessful operations in both. So it's not like it's the clear favorite. It's just I find it to be a bit easier to do well than the design bid build model. Yeah.
And so those conversations and asking questions and getting more information is literally part of what we build into our training now, because that is the carpenter's job at this point. It's also increasingly the electrician and plumbers and HVAC specialist job as well, to look at the plans, and if they see something that doesn't make sense, or they have an area of expertise where they know they could do it better a slightly different way, like building the skill set to recognize, oh, this is a place where I should ask a question,
Right.
whether it's because I need additional info or clarity, or because none of us have the information. Like, have we actually checked the specs on this combination of materials that we're about to apply? Like, why? It would be helpful to me to understand the rationale for why this particular, system of barriers and tapes and whatnot, because for this situation, I'm not sure. And so that's a new skill set that, again, with these increasingly complicated projects that have proof of performance at the end point, which is new for the construction industry. You as a HERS rater, you are showing up and being like, show me that you actually have
Yeah.
done the thing that your designer back in whenever spec'd out. Like, that is a new dynamic that, again, requires, a really nuanced and robust skill set for everyone that's involved in the project. And so part of the, again, take it back to sort of the industry strength, I think, to your point, Brendan, having resilient and varied and continuously built and curated relationships across the industry actually is one of the new keys of success.
Oh yeah.
You cannot go it alone. You cannot assume that your electrician will always be your electrician and will get it done. And so again, that's another skill set, the ability to have peer support and peer experts from other businesses and not always feel like you are in competition, is a new skill set that's important to have as well.
I want to wrap things up, but I want to maybe with one last question. It's maybe a little bit of a curveball, but one thing that always kind of eats in my head about these things is, is this is what everything we're talking about here tonight, is this a luxury product for people who have the money to afford it, or is this something that's really going to become like the standard for every house that's built? And I a lot of what I do is through the Mass Save program, and people come and so there's like money that's being put out there, and some people, usually if people are going to live in the home or their family's going to live in the home, they kind of get like, this money's coming in and I'm going to invest it to make the house more comfortable, more energy efficient, more resilient. It's going to retain its value over time. But then sometimes there are people who are building to rent, or they just want to flip it and they just want to pocket that money. So you get both kinds of clients, and I would really like to feel like that this is something that can be, I mean, the codes to some degree I think is kind of lifting the floor, and builders are going to come along kicking and screaming if they have to. Sometimes they get a bad blower door test at the end, and they realize they need to take it more seriously. But what do you think about that? And I'd say even for the co-op side too. Is being can you be a co-op and still serve clients who are more of a maybe really on a budget?
Well, I mean, I guess the quick note about like Byggmeister's experience is, yeah, it's not cheap to work with a company like us. That's for sure. And that's why we target specific project types. You know, we're not like a handyman repair shop. We're a design, build, remodeling exclusive company, because those projects can sometimes, not all the times, afford the amount of effort and time that we want to spend on them to make them really good. Um, and there's other slimmer models to do that that can also be successful. And that's, you know, each group kind of chooses how they want to deliver it and serve different areas of the market. I think we're lucky to be in the greater Boston area, where there's a lot of different factors that allow a business like ours to be successful that may not be true elsewhere, or wouldn't be true in the same way that we are successful here. Yeah, it's really difficult. I think it's a growing discussion point how expensive it has become to do anything to your house, especially here in Eastern Massachusetts. I mean, even in regional New England, where there's less code enforcement and less licensure requirements, those types of things, it's far less expensive. And there's a lot to be said about that. But the standard is also much higher. So, you know, it's a pro and a con. It's a give and a take to any approach in how you deal with it. I don't know that I could speak to like the answer to that by any means, but that's at least the start of it. And I know I don't want to go too long. So yeah.
My perspective, looking at the macro level of this whole discussion, is if you turn back the clocks 15 years to Governor Deval Patrick's administration, he took a gamble on the life sciences industry and invested, essentially earmarked $1 billion to be invested in that industry. And now Kendall Square is the life sciences hub of the world, right? The economic development bill that was just passed in November includes $1 billion of support for the climate tech industry. Okay. So, you know, we're playing catch up right now. We're leading the world in life sciences. We're playing catch up behind, you know, California, maybe one other state relative to where we are on climate tech. And by committing $1 billion, I think the administration is saying this is important. So will it just be a luxury for people that can afford it, or is it going to become pervasive? I would think it's going to become pervasive, just one guy's prediction. But I mean, there's certainly the state is putting the resources behind it to encourage the continued development and rollout of, you know, climate-friendly technology.
I would just add that the studio's reason for being is because one of our co-founders, Nick Falkoff, who owns Auburndale Builders, worked with a client who really believed that it was worth spending money for the Auburndale Builders project team and the associated trades to learn the passive house method. And so Nick always says, like, the Bribers, thanks to Frank and Fran, you know, they spent the money to train my team on their house. And I think it took 2 years. And so the studio was founded because most clients are not that generous with training up the workforce on the next standard of the profession. And so the studio exists to try to offer some of that practice and some of that training for building companies, again, in a model that minimizes the cost and minimizes the barriers to that training and gives practice before you are on the project site for the client who won't pay for you to practice and make mistakes. And so we genuinely see it as part of our mission to try to help make these projects more affordable by taking the training and the mistakes pieces out of it as early as possible. So yeah, that's a huge question you asked, but at least I get to say that I own a 100-year-old home. And the reason I ended up at Studio HPDC was I was like, I do not know how this is going to work for normal people like me. Who is doing this work? And so apparently it's us.
Yeah.
It's us.
Well, thank you all so very much. This was an amazing conversation. I kind of had a feeling that we were going to have a great conversation, but this was really spectacular, and I'm so glad that we were able to hold it here at the Community Church of Boston. And you know, we'll probably continue the conversation again. Maybe we'll do this again at some point. But I'll wrap it up for now and pass it back to Dean for one last comment.
I think the favorite thing I heard tonight is ideas are free. And it reminds me of one of our theme songs of this church. Die Gedanken sind frei. Thoughts are free. I don't know if you've heard this song before. I learned it from Pete Seeger. Die Gedanken sind frei. My thoughts freely flower. Die Gedanken sind frei. My thoughts give me power. No scholar can map them. No hunter can trap them. No man can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure. My conscience decrees. These thoughts I must treasure. My thoughts will not cater to duke or dictator. No one can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. And if tyrants take me and throw me in prison, my thoughts will break free and blossom like blossoms in season. The foundations will crumble, the structures shall tumble, and freedom will cry. Die Gedanken sind frei, and freedom will cry. Die Gedanken sind frei. Let's go have some refreshments, enjoy the company of these wonderful folks who have joined us today at Community Church of Boston.
Wow. What a finale.
Yeah, mic drop.
Good thing we don't have to, right?
There's a musical component to
Can tell. Love it. That's great.
Show HPDC band.
Yeah, exactly. Amy, bring your bass next time.
That's my next community ambition.
Oh, good. Nice. I agree with somebody's not to say, but yeah. And that's like we should know.
Likely. I would not say that I'm familiar is too strong. I know that it exists, but I haven't really thought about it.
Yeah, because based on who you're talking to and the thing you're doing, it might be some resistance.
Yeah.
So, if you're talking to them,
That is definitely a conversation that slowly around is, again, how do you think about structuring and so other trades have clearer. So that is
last Saturday, I said, well, they want to set the So, I mean, there's a bunch of ideas about that. So, you know, that,
That's like our next level.
Right. Yeah.
5 years.
California or Texas. There's so many giant tracts of new houses.
Project.
And everybody tends to construction. So
our next again, think about what
reconstruction and
collaborative.
there's something about
the
infrastructure.
infrastructure. So
You're
Somebody all the time. That doesn't work well.
So maybe it's really old.
I'm really good.
Discussion. And that's kind of related, like partner agencies. Have been grouped together under a new financial. They were defined like last time, the centers, training centers, all that. And they've tried to also make it easier to.
Well, everybody's
number
on
on
telephone.
telephone. And that is still.
You'll see, it's my way.
Yeah. But that your job is easier. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I realize it's down my old, like my house is in the later. Yes, I get not everything, like I walk by myself around. Yeah, I can't.
Idea.
Yeah, mass talent.
I do. It's carpentry part, so it's I do one with them, like, yeah.
There's such a,
And
such a.
yeah, right. At the beginning, I think all of that. Yeah. That's a good way to start. I did. I know how people even some plumbing. Yeah.
It's another value add that you're going to, fine, because the company for, they don't want, by the way, you can afford tax rate. That's a really, so for you.
But I sell it in some. They want to be able to know that you're doing it. Well, yeah, at least a little.
Buyers who buy.
You have.
There's a cash.
No, or go to the US or whatever. Yes, you get like two Francis. Way to see the things. Yeah, I know people have been a bit that I cut the for so many years, but they still doing like the big price stuff, you know. Oh, yeah. And you find, I don't know, there's so many construction company involved that it's just everywhere. Yeah. I don't know, sometimes I go to see. Yeah. That's kind of higher for right. So people, I'm not like, you know, I have like 7 years. But I consider like a person. Yeah. I mean, it's classic, you know, anytime you bring anybody in. Especially, I talk about this whole time, I do a lot of sales. And it's always like, well, I have to like help them and look at it, I can't believe. Why do I have that? I like to forget where that feedback comes from. And to a certain degree, it's not the person buying the house, because it's like, how do you fix it or whatever. And that's not the thing, well, things can be true. But I also think it's just creating an incredibly complicated decision-making.
Okay, thanks for the invite.
Right now, doing like.
I think I'm officially corporation. Okay. So that's how I'm incorporated.
Yeah, companies that the guy. Yeah, there's nothing I would fix. Yeah, right. And so I'm not the thing that I would fix. Yeah, the time I would fix. There's problems with at the end, it's like, yeah. I kind of want, and that's something that he didn't get along. It's better. So that give you a sense of, but also like it means the man shouldn't become passionate for like, oh, I designed this because I thought you were going to use like yeah, you can't do a vinyl sliding, it rains on wood. So you know, it's funny to different. And if you design for one detail, then I'll do something like 40 years that these employees. Now the details other model you already have a team of 6 people. It's good to have sort of open bylaws. We need to rework. And I'm not really either. I can write up the bylaws without kind of like. It's different when you're doing like. Well, that's why you work in old house. Really, all doing that right. Hopefully the center can help. And the guy thinks gonna get like a front. What's the idea of the, I'm gonna do my bed. I'm gonna find this front door and put out a pass gun on some house. People come to me with every question about that. How much you want that? Yeah, man, I said something now. I do. Well, it's about the roof. Why don't you practice your business and then this EFD? Yeah. So research. Here's some kind of research survey. Design so different houses that where we get someone who creates a couple of people who do their job for the last year because the staff relation was sent at every meeting. People tend to gravitate like what comments do I need to understand? Massachusetts.
They go planning the answer tribes and while they're not the answers, putting them in touch with someone to get them looking. So there's a resource.
New and old, about 12 years, old house that,
Correct.
and they're not there, it's such a strong family, you know, it's like, all these things, like.
I'm a reason why this they figure out.
Those are the things that should. And then they did it, right?
Yeah.
Provide.
All the different models, you can run a successful business.
That's the hard.
Yeah. I mean, small business is a big kind of.
Individual thing, they want to spend like $40,000 or a function home. Basically, that's it. Yeah, you get up. Yeah, around here.
The other thing.
Well, that's really what really powerful the house.
I bought it off somebody who was retired.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, for like
big box, like, it's the most.
Compare that to like,
Yeah.
opening a franchise, I think that.
Yeah.
Some people don't.
Where about
How much money? We're like, you know, probably this is probably we're more like a. Never gonna just get to start, never gonna get to day one.
Yeah.
So it's something.
Yeah.
I mean, but other resources, you can check some out, the PFP is master map, like this is states.
Okay, yeah, so my average was like a way, you know.
That may be the, I don't know the master of this is the competition, master development. Someone in completely different organization is state. And so they do some of the system, they do operating capital, they do, you know.
Yeah, all that.
They are resources out there, they have. So there's stuff out there, yeah, there's very little free money anymore, like.
I have a friend,
There's a ton of it, like COVID, not much grant money, other than. That's training for.
That's the case.
If I know the money's there.
That's great. Well, there's nothing beating you. Yeah.
Even though it's there.
Sure. Yeah.
So keep it out in the center, though, as preserve, like,
You got sell the lead.
half dozen people want to figure out what's, you know, hopefully we'll have a program.
All right.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks for the great feeling.
Okay, so I got it.
Response.
So, yeah. Thanks for coming.
Sarah was.
Yeah.
They're actually.
Yeah.
Right in the site where you.
Yeah.
There's a very bunch of service.
Yeah.
And then also sponsorship. So.
Yeah.
One of my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One of our golden tires. So overnight. So everything's.
I spoke to your name.
Oh, I'm fine. Yeah.
Like we're doing a BS and beer at the North End School, bringing up Joe Seabrook at the end of this month. And so I think some hopefully you from that.
Yeah, I'll try to come more. Well, now we have to record it, maybe more than once on the inside. People probably because they're. I'm just curious, is that gonna be like some great food? I'll put it on the results of the one that you see, and you know, put this. Or do this. The first podcast, I don't know if these kids, they don't have. But it's safe, they have a. Yeah, I mean, they're.
Watch it.
Maybe like, oh, what do you got? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you for everything. Yeah, I including, because I'm gonna do the website. I probably will be there.
Absolutely.
Nice to meet you too.
Friday, probably.